The Invisible Nanny. Sophia Carter's alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m., the shrill sound slicing through the quiet of her small quarters attached to the sprawling Harrington estate. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stretched, trying to shake off the remnants of a restless night. At 26, her life had become a delicate balance of duty, invisibility, and survival. The bankruptcy of her small hometown bakery had forced her into this world, one of vast wealth, strict schedules, and high expectations. The live-in nanny position for the Harrington family had seemed like a lifeline, even if it came with a heavy cost to her independence and privacy. The mansion loomed in the distance as she stepped outside to catch a breath of early morning air. Its white columns glowed faintly under the pre-dawn sky, a symbol of everything she could never have. Sophia adjusted her uniform, a simple gray dress designed to make her blend into the background, and secured her blonde hair in a tight bun. Minimal makeup, professional demeanor, and a promise to remain unnoticed. Her survival depended on it. The estate's kitchen smelled faintly of fresh pastries and brewed coffee, remnants from the morning staff who had begun preparing breakfast for the household. Sophia moved silently, efficiently, pouring cereal, cutting fruit, and setting out plates for the 5-year-old twins, Emma and Lily. The girls, her sole bright spot in a life of invisibility, greeted her with wide smiles and sleepy laughter. Their warmth reminded her why she endured the endless rules, the long hours, and the oppressive quiet of the mansion. "Good morning, Sophia," Emma chirped, tossing her small curls over her shoulder. "Morning, sweethearts," Sophia replied, sitting on the edge of the bed as she helped braid their hair. Lily yawned and leaned against her shoulder. These moments, filled with laughter and innocence, were her sanctuary. By 7 a.m., the girls were dressed and ready, and Sophia guided them down the grand staircase, their tiny hands clutching hers as they navigated the polished wooden steps. The estate's gardens were bathed in soft light, dew still clinging to the roses and azaleas, and Sophia felt a fleeting peace as she watched the twins run along the paths. Julian Harrington, the twins' father, appeared briefly at the door, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit. He kissed each child on the forehead without breaking stride toward his car. "Busy day today. I'll be home late," he called over his shoulder, his gray eyes briefly meeting Sophia's. Tall, broad-shouldered, with streaks of silver in his black hair, Julian was the embodiment of wealth and power. Sophia hated the flutter in her stomach at his presence. It was pointless, foolish, and she told herself repeatedly to ignore it. The morning passed in a familiar rhythm: arts and crafts, reading sessions, walks through the estate gardens. By lunchtime, the twins were ready for their nap, and Sophia retreated to her quarters, a small, modest space that allowed her a rare moment of solitude. She planned to do laundry, organize personal notes, and rest briefly. Slipping out of her uniform, she reveled in the freedom of her own space. For the first time that day, she felt like herself. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Sophia froze, half-dressed, heart hammering, as her eyes widened. Julian Harrington stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of shock and confusion. Time seemed to slow as the distance between them shrank. Sophia's mind raced, searching for words, for excuses, for any shield that might protect her dignity in that terrifying moment. I didn't realize anyone was here," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, cheeks burning. Julian's gaze softened ever so slightly, though the sharpness of his gray eyes didn't disappear entirely. Sophia's pulse raced, not just from embarrassment, but from the undeniable tension that had always been there, buried under months of silent observation and professional boundaries. In that instant, the invisible nanny became seen, and the delicate equilibrium of her carefully controlled world hung by a thread. The moment would change everything, whether she was ready or not. The unexpected encounter. Sophia stood frozen, her mind scrambling to assemble a coherent thought. Julian Harrington, the billionaire master of the estate, was there, in her quarters, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Curiosity mixed with surprise, maybe even something sharper. She tugged at the hem of her cotton skirt, a futile attempt to cover herself as she tried to summon composure. I thought the twins were napping, she finally managed, her voice tight. I didn't expect anyone to come in. Julian's gaze softened, though the sharpness of his gray eyes didn't disappear entirely. I thought I had the house to myself. I didn't know anyone else was here. He ran his hand through his hair, a rare moment of vulnerability flashing across his face. Sophia's stomach twisted in a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. She had spent months observing him from a distance, studying his routines, the way he interacted with the twins, the controlled precision with which he navigated his empire. Yet here he was, unguarded, caught off balance, and looking at her in a way that she had never imagined. I'll get dressed, she said quickly, pulling the skirt down and adjusting her bra strap. She felt ridiculous, exposed and helpless. She had always been invisible in this house of wealth and power, but in that instant, that invisibility was gone. Julian took a careful step forward, his tone measured. Sophia, wait. Don't rush. It's fine, really. I didn't mean to startle you. Her pulse raced. The air between them was charged, a strange mixture of embarrassment, tension, and an unspoken recognition that something had shifted. Sophia tried to reclaim her usual professionalism, to remind herself that this was Julian Harrington, the man who barely noticed her presence, the one that she had learned to observe without being seen, yet her carefully constructed boundaries were trembling. Well, she said finally, her voice steadier than she expected. Since the twins are asleep, I'll take this moment to... She trailed off, realizing there was little left to say. She straightened, pulling her hair into a neat bun, and attempted to regain her composed demeanor. His gaze softened further, and he finally allowed a small, almost hesitant smile. "You're incredible, Sophia," he said quietly. "I've watched you with them, how patient you are, how much care you put into everything, and I've never said anything. I didn't know how to." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had spent months in this mansion, observing him, serving him, never daring to hope for acknowledgement. Now here it was, fragile and tentative, yet profoundly disarming. "Thank you," she murmured. The words felt inadequate, yet they were all she could offer. For a few moments, they simply stood there, the silence heavy with unspoken tension. Julian seemed to struggle with how to proceed, as if he were navigating unfamiliar territory. Sophia realized that in this house of wealth and power, she had always been expected to know her place. But in that instant, the roles were unclear. She was no longer just a shadow, she was a presence, noticed, even if only for a fleeting moment. Finally, Julian cleared his throat. "I should go," he said, stepping back. You should finish getting ready." Sophia nodded, grateful yet disappointed at the sudden return to normalcy. She watched him leave, her mind spinning. This encounter, brief as it had been, had changed something fundamental. She could no longer deny the curiosity, the flutter of feelings she had worked so hard to suppress, and for the first time she realized that the invisible nanny might not remain invisible for long. As she closed the door behind him, Sophia took a deep breath. The balance of her life had shifted.
The mansion no longer felt like a place she could navigate purely as an observer. The tension between her and Julian had been set in motion, and she sensed that the days to come would challenge everything she thought she knew about control, privacy, and the boundaries of power and desire. In the quiet of her room, she straightened her uniform and looked out the window at the estate gardens. The sun was rising, painting the grounds in gold. Sophia realized that her life in the Harrington mansion was about to become far more complicated and far more interesting than she could have ever imagined. Boundaries tested. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the Harrington estate as Sophia guided Emma and Lily through their breakfast routine. The twins chattered endlessly about a new storybook they wanted to read, their laughter echoing lightly in the grand
walls begin to crumble. The evening descended over the Harrington estate, the mansion bathed in warm amber light. Sophia had finished preparing dinner for the twins and placed them at the table, watching them chatter about the day's adventures. The air was calm, almost deceptively ordinary, but beneath it, a subtle tension lingered. She could feel it in the quiet glance Julian gave her from across the room, the way he lingered near the kitchen doorway, as though hesitant to leave, yet unable to resist observing her every movement. "You make it look effortless," he said finally, breaking the silence. His tone was casual, but there was a weight to it that made Sophia's stomach flutter. "I've been doing this for months," Sophia replied, keeping her voice steady. She wiped a stray drop of sauce from the counter, careful to maintain her composed demeanor. Yet inside, she was acutely aware of how her pulse quickened every time he was near. Julian stepped closer, his eyes scanning the neatly arranged table and the sleepy twins. "I've always thought I understood responsibility," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But seeing you, I realize I have no idea what it takes to care for someone so completely." Sophia swallowed, unsure how to respond. She had long been trained to remain professional, to keep her emotions in check. But his words struck a chord deep within her, echoing in places she had long kept hidden. "It's not always easy," she admitted softly. "But when you see the results, when the twins smile, when they feel safe, it makes everything worth it." He nodded, and for a moment they stood in silence, the unspoken understanding between them growing heavier. Sophia realized that the invisible walls she had built around herself were beginning to crack. She had always believed that detachment was her protection. Yet the longer she spent with him, the more impossible it became to maintain distance. The twins, sensing the subtle tension between their caregivers, giggled and began asking questions, breaking the momentary stillness. Sophia moved to attend to them, but Julian remained by the table, quietly observing. "Teach me," he said suddenly, his voice firm yet gentle. "Teach me how you do it, how you manage to stay patient, to care so deeply without losing yourself." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined a moment where he would ask her for guidance, for insight into her world. "It's not something you learn in a day," she said, keeping her composure. "It's patience, empathy, and a willingness to put someone else's needs above your own. It's exhausting, but it's also rewarding." Julian studied her intently, as though trying to memorize every word, every gesture. "I want to learn," he said quietly. "I want to be better for them, and maybe for you too." The admission caught Sophia off guard. She had always maintained a careful boundary, never allowing herself to hope for anything beyond professional respect. But his words, sincere, raw, unpolished, pierced through the armor she had constructed. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of vulnerability in him, a man who had spent a lifetime controlling everything around him, now confronted with the chaos of genuine care and emotion. The evening continued with small lessons, Julian attempting to feed the twins, help them with homework, and even engage in bedtime routines under Sophia's guidance. Each moment chipped away at the barriers between them, revealing glimpses of the man behind the imposing title of billionaire heir.
Sophia felt herself being drawn into this world, not for wealth or status, but for the rare, unguarded moments where he allowed her to see his true self. As the twins finally drifted off to sleep, Sophia and Julian lingered in the living room. The soft lamplight illuminated the faint tension in their expressions, a mix of curiosity, attraction, and caution. Julian spoke first, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I don't know where this is going, but I know I can't stop thinking about you." Sophia's breath caught. She had long suppressed her feelings, convincing herself that desire was dangerous, that attachment could only lead to heartache. Yet standing there, in the quiet of the mansion, she realized that the invisible nanny was no longer invisible to him, and not to herself. Hearts revealed. The morning sunlight spilled across the grand halls of the Harrington estate, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden rays. Sophia moved quietly, preparing breakfast for Emma and Lily, the twins' laughter echoing softly as they clambered into their chairs. The day carried an unusual energy, an almost tangible tension that neither she nor Julian could ignore. After days of quiet proximity, subtle glances, and shared responsibilities, the invisible walls separating them had nearly dissolved. Now the truth of their feelings was ready to surface. Julian appeared in the doorway, dressed casually but impeccably, his presence filling the kitchen with a weight Sophia had grown both accustomed to and deeply aware of. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, and watched her with a mixture of admiration and hesitation. "Good morning," he said, soft, almost shy, an oddity for a man so used to commanding every room he entered. "Good morning," Sophia replied, trying to maintain her professional tone, though the rhythm of her heart betrayed her. She poured orange juice for the twins and offered a gentle smile, aware that Julian's eyes lingered on her longer than propriety allowed. He stepped closer, the floorboards creaking slightly under his weight. "I've been thinking about all of this," he began carefully. "About you, me, the twins, everything. And I realized I can't go another day pretending I don't feel something." Sophia froze, her hands gripping the handle of the orange juice pitcher. She had rehearsed countless responses in her mind, none of them sufficient for the moment when the words finally arrived. "Julian," she asked, uncertain if she should continue or retreat behind the walls she had built so carefully. He moved closer, stopping just short of the counter. "Sophia, I know I'm not perfect. I've spent my life controlling everything, pushing people away, keeping emotions locked up. But you've shown me a world I didn't know existed. Patience, care, love, and I can't ignore it anymore. I don't want to be invisible to you, and I don't want you to be invisible to me." Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of fear and longing. She had always believed that desire was dangerous, that attachment was a risk she couldn't afford. Yet here he was confessing not just attraction, but genuine admiration, recognition, and respect. It was overwhelming. "Julian, I never expected this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so long hiding, trying to be nothing more than a shadow in this house. But you make it hard to stay invisible." The twins, sensing the intensity of the moment, paused in their coloring. Emma looked up, curiosity lighting her face. "Are you two going to get married too?" she asked innocently, earning a soft chuckle from Julian and a gentle smile from Sophia. "Not yet," Julian said, kneeling to their level. "But we're figuring things out." Later, after the twins were settled in their rooms for the afternoon nap, Sophia and Julian found themselves alone in the garden. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and the distant sound of water from the fountain created a serene backdrop. Julian took her hands in his, the gesture filled with sincerity and tenderness. "I don't want to just watch from the sidelines anymore. I want to be part of your life, Sophia, if you'll let me." Sophia's chest tightened. A mixture of relief, joy, and apprehension flooded her senses. She had feared this moment for months, yet now that it had arrived, it felt inevitable, right, and terrifying all at once. "Julian, I want that too," she whispered, her voice breaking the barrier of caution she had maintained for long. "I want us together, not invisible, not apart." He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that softened his usually commanding features. Slowly, carefully, he leaned forward, their lips meeting in a tender kiss, the culmination of weeks of unspoken tension, shared responsibilities, and gradual vulnerability. The moment was long, unhurried, and full of meaning, each second affirming the unspoken bond they had forged. From that day forward, Sophia was no longer invisible. Julian saw her, truly saw her, and their lives intertwined in a way neither had anticipated but both had needed. The twins thrived in the warmth of their evolving family, and the once distant commanding billionaire discovered the depth of love and care that patience and humility could bring. Together they had found a balance between power and tenderness, control and surrender, invisibility and being fully seen.